This interview is going to be so much fun because Barry Silverberg is one of those guys that you just absolutely are so grateful to know and have in your network. Barry Silverberg is the executive director, Center for Nonprofit Studies and Nonprofit Austin at Austin Community College. I am proud to call him a friend, and I'm so excited for you guys to meet him. Barry. Well,
All right.
yeah, you ready to go?
I'm not sure.
Well,
I'm not sure.
you're an old,
I've been looking up what books I've read lately.
okay.
And what my favorite music is. So don't ask me those questions.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I am Steve Harper, and with me today is one of the coolest guys you will ever meet in Austin, Texas, Barry Silverberg. Barry, thank you so much for joining me for the Ripple Effect Podcast.
My pleasure.
I'm excited to have people get exposure to you and the great work that you're doing through Austin Community College. And we're going to cover some of that. But, give us the backstory. I'm all about origin stories for the folks that I interview. And I'm curious because as they hear you speak today, they're going to tell that you're not originally from Texas. So how did you get to Austin? How did you get involved in Austin Community College? And then maybe give like a little bit of maybe an overview how you and I became such great friends. No pressure.
So how long is this? No. So I forgot the question now, but no, I do. So I came to Austin in 1995 to lead the Jewish Federation of Austin. I came here primarily, I had spent at that point 20 years leading Jewish federations. I left there after 3 years for a variety of reasons, philosophical differences and others, and ultimately created the Center for Nonprofit Studies, which now we've rebranded as Nonprofit Austin here at Austin Community College. In terms of background, my background is in something we call Jewish communal service, which is like social work and administration. And so I've always been interested in the nonprofit arena. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and you can't tell that anymore.
Not at all. I thought it was Bastrop, honestly.
No, well, it's not East Texas. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't you all on Tutty Toy Street, okay?
I could get you killed over there, right? As I understand.
Well, yeah. New York is a good place to be from. It's not a good place to be. So I left there when I was 16. Actually, I went away to college. I was rather young, and grew up fast. So, that I'm not sure what more you want. I mean, I can go into a lot of stuff, but for you to focus. I mean,
yeah. Well, I'm curious. What was the genesis behind the interest in the nonprofit sector, that space?
So I come from a lower middle class background, maybe upper lower class background. My father was a maintenance man, a janitor, and an elevator operator back in those days when many of your viewers and listeners probably won't know this, but you used to have somebody in the elevator who would operate the elevator for you.
Yeah.
Dad was one of those people. And I was basically programmed to go to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And I was always, my parents were very compassionate people. One thing I remember when I'm asked this question that always strikes me is I remember when my father, when he was operating the freight elevator in New York, the homeless, who back then were called bums, and that's the words that were being used, would come by. And I remember once when I was a youngster and somebody came by and asked my father for money, and he wouldn't give them money, but instead he took them he said, no, let's go get some to eat. And he took me along, and I was a small little guy, and I was embarrassed to be near this smelly, unkempt person.
Yeah.
Went into a coffee shop. My father bought him lunch or breakfast, whatever it was. I sat there. I was like, and then the guy left. Okay. and that really struck me that, and it really fits into my tradition, which is not to, is to give people a helping hand.
Yeah.
And that, when I think about where it comes from, it really comes from my parents. But then I became fascinated by, sounds as silly as it sounds, the authority structure of nonprofits.
Yeah.
Which is both problematic and enlightening. I grew up during the intellectually. I grew up during the Vietnam era, and I was actually a conscientious objector, so I was always on the outside of things.
Yeah.
And I never really liked authority. I know you find that hard to believe. I just reject it naturally.
Yep.
It becomes a problem when you're working in an institution of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And what I liked about the nonprofit sector was people creating and doing things. And so I think that's part of it. And I always thought everybody wanted to help people.
Yeah.
And then I discovered rather late in my career, actually, how few of us there really are that really, really care about other people.
Yeah.
Beyond their tribe and their family.
Yeah.
And that as obvious it may be to a lot of people, that was a great wake-up call for me, because I didn't realize how few people cared as deeply as I cared.
Yeah.
And it really fit into who I am and what I am. So
Yeah.
I've always been somebody kind of on the periphery, causing trouble. I like to describe myself as a provocateur, saying what I want to say mercifully, as you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We talked about when we first met and you came to see me, and I was probably as obnoxious as could be, telling you were a twit and you had no future. Of course, you're already running 2 or 3 companies at that point.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy, more than anything else, helping people. It gives me great satisfaction.
Yeah.
And it does more for me, really, than anybody else. And I enjoy being able to speak the truth with a capital T when I believe I know it, without being obnoxious and arrogant. Although, you know me, you know I am both. So, but I wear it with pride.
Yeah. Well, I would say, the thing that we'll go back to, how you and I first met here in just a second. But I mean, the thing that has always stood out to me about you is that you do say what's on your mind, but you say it with passion and conviction. And you are by far one of the most interesting and probably the neatest person that I've met in Austin, just because you are so committed to contributing and helping other people in whatever way you can. And that really not only stood out for me when I first met you, but it stood out in every conversation we've had since then. And we've had a bunch, right? And this giving heart that you have is the ultimate ripple concept, right? So I take you back just for a second when you had that meal with your dad and that homeless person and he left. Did you have a conversation with your dad? Did he give you, was that an opportunity for him to impart any wisdom about this giving heart mindset?
My dad wasn't a talker.
Okay.
And actually, I think he was a little afraid of me because, and I don't say this with arrogance, just as a fact, I was always pretty much a smart fellow, intellectually, wherever it came from. So, my father wasn't dumb. I mean, he was street smart and so forth. But I think I kind of scared my parents.
Yeah.
Because, I just had a different kind of mind, than they had. Although they obviously came from them. Yep. So we didn't do much talking. I think I learned mostly by example.
Yeah.
My father was literally the kind of guy who would take the shirt off his back and give it to you. And I mean, literally.
That's great.
If you ask him for something, and my wife complains about this all the time about me, if you ask him for something, he'd give you 3 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's kind of like, it's endearing, but it's also kind of, a pain in the butt to have 3 of something when you only want 1.
Well, I mean, obviously, even though he wasn't a big talker, I mean, like you said, you learned from example, and what a great example Absolutely. That was, Absolutely. For him to take you along and for that experience to evolve. I remember one of my first jobs was working at an organization where the CEO had a fondness for the homeless, and there were people in and around my hometown of Albuquerque that were legitimately trying to help themselves out of their circumstances, right? And they wanted to create a paper called the Homeless News, but nobody had actually
Yeah.
given them any any encouragement, let alone any place to actually produce this thing. And I remember, yeah, and I'm 18 years old, very impressionable at the time, but he said, "Hey Steve, this is going to be your thing. You're going to talk to these people when they come in, and it's going to be very uncomfortable. And they're these people have, some of them have, some very strong mental challenges, but you need to figure out how to communicate with them, because we need to take these story ideas and what they're doing and make sure that we can, create." And really, at the end of the day, it was a newspaper, but it was really more or less a newsletter, and they would sell it for a nickel or a dime a piece or something out on the street. And I remember him saying, "This is something that we have as an opportunity. We have a luxury to give back."
Exactly.
And it was probably at the time, now looking back at some of the people that I met along the way and just hearing some of their stories, it was so incredible to recognize some of these people were just absolutely brilliant geniuses
Yeah.
that had just fallen on hard times or had gotten involved in drugs and alcohol, and that had just completely, changed their life perspective. But how many of them had such brilliant perspectives on the way that they were living, what the world was about, and where it was going. And it's one of those experiences, I suspect, much like yours, that really just changed my mindset forever in
Yeah.
terms of, hey, when and where you can contribute and help, you should.
And also recognizing everybody is unique and special, and all that. I mean, I think so. I just like helping people. It's a sickness,
Yeah. But it's the best kind of sickness, right?
but
At the end of the
sometimes you overly
day.
help. I mean, so everything in moderation.
Yeah. Well, we were talking before we clicked to record about how you and I first connected, and we had met through a mutual friend here in Austin who had seen what I was doing and had seen me speak at an event, and knew, of course, what you were doing. They were at the time trying to get kind of something not affiliated with ACC off the ground in terms of a nonprofit movement, right? And they wanted to focus in on the creative alliance of these different organizations, these different leaders. And so she had approached me at an event and said, "Hey, do you know Barry Silverberg?" Which is funny because I've said that to so many people now over the years. And at the time, I'm like, "No, I don't know." And she's like,
That
"You
blank
need,
blank.
yeah, you need to meet Barry." So she connected us. You agreed to meet. You said, "Come down to my office. Here's how you're going to do it." And I walked in, and I thought it was just going to be this informal meeting. And man, you just dove right in. Like, "What are you about? What are you doing? Why do you think you're going to make a difference in the world?" And I was like, "Whoa." And then you're like, "What's this Ripple stuff? I don't understand it. I think it's very," you put me through the paces. And then at the very end, you just kind of smiled and said, "I like how you handle yourself." And I just remember that sticking out, very, specifically, because at the time I was fairly new about getting the book and the concept out there, and I really hadn't been challenged on it. And you put me through the paces, but you're like, "Hey, look, if you can't handle it in here, you'll never handle it out there." And it was just such a powerful interaction at that point. I'm like, I just know I got to be friends with this guy.
Well, I remember that. I was much younger then. I had principles back then, and I tried to apply them. I'm much more temperate now.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that is? Just because of age and wisdom, or you're just
Well, I'm
tired?
not sure wisdom necessarily comes with age, but
Yeah.
uh, I think that I think that probably at that point, honestly, there was a high degree of arrogance. Honestly, and as part of that, it may have been cute, but it was sort of arrogance. And I just try to be more sensitive to people. So if you came in right now, okay, and were to do this again,
Uh huh.
well, first of all, I probably wouldn't set up the meeting with you because I'm way too important. Uh, but but if I did set up the meeting, I'd have some of my people talk to your people.
Yeah.
Of course, I ain't got no people, but that's okay.
Well, you had a person at one point who was
Oh,
became a mutual friend too.
I have staff. Yes.
Yeah, and you have Kate, who's
Yes.
I know she keeps you in line. The thing I have to tell my audience is, Barry Barry jokes a lot, but he has this amazing ability to attract really incredible people to him.
I've been very
And
fortunate.
yeah, you had Lisa for for a
Yeah, she
number of
was wonderful.
years.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, she's great. She's been on the podcast twice now,
Right.
from her van,
Right.
which is great. So for those of you
I
that
drove
might,
her to drive. I drove her to a van. I mean, the experience at working with me was such she just wanted to give up on civilization.
it's funny when she was actually contemplating it, that was her biggest, hang up was, leaving you. And that says something about the kind of leadership you have and the kind of impression that you make on the
Oh,
people
thank
that
you.
work for you. So, you're just an all around amazing guy, but
Very
I don't
kind.
want to get your head too big. So, I mean,
No, it's already a pretty big object to begin with. You know.
well, for my audience, you've been great. You've brought me in to teach classes there to the nonprofit, leadership program, and I've gotten to meet so many amazing people. But you have this very unique ability to identify qualities in people that maybe they don't see in themselves. Where do you think that comes from?
Being serious for a moment, which is difficult. Um, I think I really, having grown up the way I grew up, okay, and
Yeah.
living now in a very different environment, okay. I wasn't poor, but didn't have any of the assets and resources I have right now.
Yeah.
Okay, um, I really feel strongly, not necessarily for the underdog, but for the person who's not taken seriously or the person who's not given opportunities.
Yeah.
And this relates back to when I met with you. I'll meet with anybody. Okay. No, seriously, I will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's a great thrill and a real upper whatever to help somebody see the potential in themselves.
Yeah.
I do a lot of call it mentoring, coaching, counseling, whatever, where people are looking for jobs or whatever. Um, and sometimes they'll come in, they'll hand me their resume, and it's really a piece of not very good stuff. Uh, and you'll ask them, and you start commenting on it, and they'll say, "Well, I didn't do it. I paid somebody to do it." Okay? And my point is, and this does relate to your question,
Yeah.
is that anything you give somebody has to be yourself.
Yep.
And so whether it's professionally written or not, it's got to be you.
Yeah.
And then I talk with the folks and we go through a process and they begin to realize how much they have going for themselves.
Yeah.
I think it's very much like your Ripple thing.
Yep.
People begin to realize their potential and the possibility that they have. And I find that just exhilarating, and that's kind of my drug.
Yeah.
Uh, and the same thing with our kids as our kids are in their 30s now, but when they were growing up, always tried to give them opportunity to have their own head, their own way, obviously with discipline and so forth.
Sure. Sure.
But I really believe that we need to be tolerant of differences. As a Jewish person, it's essential for my existence in
Yeah.
a Christian society or in America. So I really believe we have to be tolerant of each other. I can't say I always am, but and help each other to see the good in ourselves.
Yeah.
So, as Ronald Reagan would say, there's a pony in there someplace.
I love that. I love that. Well, talk a little bit about the work that you do through Austin Community College, because you mentioned you started this program from scratch, right? And they took a chance on you, and you kind of took a chance on them, as I recall the story that you told me one time. But give my audience just a little, a little understanding and appreciation for the great work that you're doing, because just since you started this center, right? I mean, the nonprofit landscape has shifted dramatically, right?
Absolutely.
In Austin.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. When we started 22 years ago, when I left the Jewish Federation world, did some consulting, which means I was unemployed, uh, uh, and uh, and then ultimately, took on this task here at the ACC. The basic idea is to provide learning opportunities. We don't call them training or boot camp or anything like that,
right.
but learning opportunities to people, which has now been transformed into workforce development, the same thing for the nonprofit sector. Our goal was to take people's talents and people who had blessings, like yourself, for example, who had something to offer, and we're willing to offer it either at no cost or at low cost, okay, to share with other people
Yeah.
and to create the multiplier effect. That was the whole concept. And I always believed, and I still believe, that all the problems in the world, we have the resources to solve if we apply them. And what
Yep.
we're missing is political will,
Yep.
analogous political will. So my little venture here was an attempt to apply that political will to the nonprofit sector. At that point, there was almost nothing available, and nothing serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we started something serious, and people said, well, nobody's going to take that seriously. Nobody's going to spend the time. Nobody's going to spend 160 hours going through a certificate in nonprofit leadership and management. You must be crazy. Because another big institution in town, something by the name of, I think it's called the University of Texas at Austin, as part of their continuing education program,
Yeah.
had a 5-day program on nonprofit management. And they called it nonprofit management. Notice we call it leadership and management.
Yeah.
So we basically grew from there. We started offering classes. In the beginning, they were free. And in the beginning, we actually gave people bagels and cream cheese for free, which I bought. And ultimately it grew. So now that it's grown, we have classes, multiple times a week. We have 5 or 6 certificates. And basically what we're about is professional development for the nonprofit sector, workforce development. And if people are interested, then go up and look at nonprofitaustin.org, our website. We've got tons of stuff up there. The thing I want to emphasize, though, and I can talk specifics if you want, but is that our approach, which goes back to what we were saying before, when we try to differentiate ourselves from others who are in the same arena, who are also doing good work, we just do it differently, is we like to think of ourselves as putting our arm appropriately around the shoulder of the person we're working with and walk the road together.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
I mean, I could drop all the big words. I try to avoid them, actually.
Yeah.
Because our goal is not to impress people. Our goal is to impact people. And what we seek to do is really to provide people opportunities for personal transformation. And I think that's why I'm so in tune with what you do. Although I'm not as complimentary as you are to folks, but is because you really want to give people this opportunity to be themselves.
Yeah.
And not to be fearful. And when somebody comes in, consultants, and I also do consulting, but when a consultant comes in, usually their goal is to help solve the problem, whatever it is. But if they have a hammer, your problem is a nail.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep.
And to impress you how smart I am. But here's where my arrogance comes in.
Yeah.
I already know I'm smart.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I don't need to impress you how smart I am. I'm being sort of silly but serious.
Yeah.
I really want to help you. Okay. And as you kindly said before, that's how the whole center operates. We don't, and again, this is not the specifics, but we don't seek grants. We haven't until now, actually, because grants come with attachments, with grant to want something.
Obligations. Yep.
Obligations. Going back to my aversion to authority, I don't like to be entangled, at least not in grants. And so we have generated our own revenue. We keep things small. We keep things tight. I've been very fortunate, as you said, to have some very, very highly qualified staff. You mentioned Kate Tolliver, this OnFam, who is our webmaster and
she's awesome.
And administrative assistant. And again, when people work with me, and this has always been my way of doing it, the title doesn't mean a damn thing.
Yep.
I really like to see people have an opportunity to grow themselves. So my first administrative assistant back in Syracuse, New York, when I was the director of the Jewish Federation there for actually about 19 years, 20 years actually, she became the editor of our newspaper, because that's the skill she had. For some reason, she was working as an administrative assistant.
Yeah.
Which is a fine job. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but she had greater aspirations. So what we try to do at the center is give people an opportunity to attain their aspirations. But sometimes people need help to realize what their aspirations are.
Yep. Yep.
And I think one of the reasons you and I click so much, aside from the fact you're part of my fan club, no. I think
I'm the president of your fan club. What are you talking about? I got voted in last November.
You're the only one.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, it's because I think we both look around us and we see possibility. We see people that are hurting that don't necessarily need to be hurting.
Yeah.
Well, they're hurting about the wrong thing, and so many of us live with constraints that are self-imposed. And I'm not suggesting that I'm a model of not having constraints. I certainly have my own crazinesses, but I try not to think of hard stops.
Yeah.
Because if you just rethink what your constraint is, it goes away.
Yep.
I mean, except if there's a physical or mental or some other kind of thing that is critical. So I try to be, and the person you were referring before, she and I knew each other from the creator of the American Creativity Society.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I was actually executive director of for a very brief time. And so creativity, particularly strategic creativity, really is what I'm about.
Yeah.
Is seeing opportunities, cross-pollinizing ideas. And again, I think that's basically what the Ripple thing is.
Yeah.
And that's why I love it, is because it's all about getting people to free up and forget their self-consciousness and get into the flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I first read about the concept of flow, by that his name, it was I think it was Czech.
Mikhail Chemensky, I think.
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
There's a lot of letters in that name.
One of the seasons he died last year, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now he's in a different flow.
Yeah.
But the concept of flow, I mean, that really is really important to help people to get there.
Yeah.
Which I see your work as being very much a part of it. And you've been very kind in what you said about me, but I should say that you've been an influence on me. I've never again insulted people like I did you when you came. But you in terms of your basic humanity and your openness and your availability to people.
Thank you.
And I think that those are essential. And there's so many people who have so many blessings to offer, and they're going to die at some point, unfulfilled in terms of their potential because they're not sharing the stuff.
Yep.
Now I sound like a preacher. It's a terrible thing for a Jewish fellow to sound like a preacher. But so.
Well, I mean, to your point, I think the thing that, you sort of, like you said, it's your drug of choice. It's my drug of choice.
Yeah.
Seeing and recognizing the potential in other people that they may not have realized or recognized in themselves, and shining a light on that, giving them confidence to go out there and show it to the world, and to be able to be there in their corner as they do it. Because as we know, the world's a rough and tumble place. And a lot of times it by design is there to beat you down in a lot of ways. And when people feel like you're veering out of the lane that they think you should be in, you're going against the grain of what expectations are. When you get that rejection, you need somebody in your corner to say, hey, ignore that. Keep going, keep doing what you are, destined to be doing. And that's what I think you and I connected so well, because we have a heart aligned mission in helping people realize where they really need to be, not where they are today, but where they could be tomorrow.
Exactly. I mean, future orientation is essential, and we have to recognize that the kind of people you were talking about before with the newspaper and the kind of people my father, helped, etc. They don't necessarily have a future orientation.
Yeah.
That having a future orientation is a luxury.
Yeah.
Because it means you've got your basic needs met.
That's right.
And so it's called the middle class hypothesis, that you can save today for tomorrow. And there are so many people who don't have that blessing, and so many well-meaning people go out and try to help people, and then don't understand why they live the way they live, or they believe
Yeah.
what they believe, or they act the way they act, because they don't recognize that they have a very, very different view of the world.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and in some instances, it's not a very thick line between what those people experienced and what the other person is experiencing, or and when they pass judgment, not realizing just how, the distance between the two is not very great, right?
no,
And
no,
any one of us could lose everything and could be put in a circumstance that we would otherwise be judging other people for, that we could suddenly find ourselves in. And
yep,
COVID was kind of a, wake up call for a lot of people, whether they had
absolutely.
jobs or sustainable income, or what could happen to the country if it does completely shut down. And, I think it did give people an appreciation for recognizing what they had, and valuing a little bit more. But the sad thing is, I don't think enough people turned on the empathy, meter, to start recognizing the challenges that other people are faced and how compounded they were with the environment we're in now.
I think there's insufficient amount of empathy,
Yeah.
which is more important than sympathy.
Yeah, I
Empathy is
agree.
to share the experience. Sympathy is to feel sorry for somebody.
That's right.
So let me take an opportunity to do a self-serving advertisement.
Okay. Yes, please
Right.
do.
So you asked me about the center. Well, our latest venture, I got caught up in philosophy. Our latest venture is we're opening something called community space. And the college has moved a lot of its operations to the Highland Mall. And as a result, there's space available at the business center where we are. And we're taking over about 7,200 square feet.
Oh, great.
And we're going to turn that into shared working space for nonprofits. And if people are interested in that, they can get in contact with me. And as a result, we're also going to open a grant center, a library, lounge area, and our whole goal is to create intentional, and it fits right into the Ripple,
Right.
and is to create intentional community space. There'll be a membership basis to it, but it's not going to be WeWork where you pay and etc. There is going to be a fee, but it's going to be focusing on getting people to really collaborate. And we're fortunate that we have the assets and resources of the college.
That's great.
And there's a lot of other parts to it, but I did want to mention that,
Sure.
in case your one listener would be interested.
Well, my wife will definitely be interested. My dad, actually, for sure, but he lives in Albuquerque, so he won't be taking advantage of the space.
Yeah,
But
well,
so I at least have two plus you, so there's three.
yeah, that's right. Isn't
Because I know you're going to go back
Albuquerque?
and listen to this episode just to hear the genius that came out of the guest host, the
That's
guest
right.
mouth, right? So
That's right. Isn't Albuquerque where they have the hot air balloons?
it is. It is.
Explains everything. Okay.
Yeah. That is so true. Well, I mean, that's an exciting development. I knew that you had talked about that being on the radar, and I'm glad that, everything that we've gone through over the last, year and a half, 2 years with COVID hasn't upended those plans. And it's great that, like you said, you have the resources and the backing of the college in order to create that. So that's phenomenal. And I can't wait, the whole time you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, it's a perfect place for us to do the 8-minute Ripple and come in and connect these nonprofits. I did have a question for you regarding the nonprofit space in general, because we talked about how dramatically that landscape has shifted. What is your perspective of that now? Because I've talked to other nonprofit leaders, the ones that were born here and kind of grew here, see all these from out of state nonprofits now coming in because of the influence of the mass exodus from other states like California. What is that doing to the environment? Do you see a dividing line being created, kind of us versus them kind of perspective, or do you see more collaboration between the two types of nonprofits here in Austin now, or what's the perspective?
Well, I come from I never like the word unique, but a special vantage point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not out there in the vineyards.
Right.
I don't have to be fighting for the hustings. That's about all I know about farming. I just use it all up. I'm from Brooklyn. They only had one tree there.
And it was angry all the time.
And it died from the concrete. But regardless, We work largely with small and mid-sized nonprofits. And so these are people that are very committed, very passionate,
Yeah.
but don't have the same resources as the large organizations. So that's, the kind of organizations that are out there coming from out of state, et cetera, usually larger places. Okay. I think what people need to realize is that the nonprofit sector and the nonprofit work environment atmosphere is very competitive.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started the center, the head of a major organization at that point, who had since retired, when I talked about the need to deal with competitiveness and having a competitive advantage, that his comment was nonprofits aren't involved in competition. Okay. So
He didn't understand nonprofits, apparently.
well,
Yeah.
that was the environment back in 1995
Yeah.
or 1998, I should say, in 2000.
Yeah.
There was this myth of love and etc. So I think nonprofits are different than businesses. And I think that some of the realization, particularly on the volunteer and the business leader side,
Mm-hmm.
is because they're seeing that they're very similar in the way we operate and what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to achieve profit necessarily, although you have to operate like a business. But I think that the environment has gotten extremely complex and far more sophisticated than it certainly was 20 years ago.
Yep.
And I think with sophistication, sometimes comes unnecessary complexity. One thing we try to do is get down to the basics. I would call elegance, simplicity. And I think what's happening in the nonprofit sector overall, as it gets more sophisticated, some of the basics are being forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a degree of formality, which is necessary in any organization. But going back, we focus a lot on values, vision, mission, roles, responsibilities, expectations, and authority.
Yeah.
I think many large, sophisticated operations think that they're beyond that. And so they start building, not all of them, I'm just talking about with these problems. They start building these grand edifices. And the problem very often is the foundation.
Yep.
And the foundations aren't strong. And I've worked with many, organizations that people would know, the names are out there, who basically tried to skip the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And they may run fantastic service delivery, but when you get down to their governance and stuff, they're mush.
Yeah.
Now, there's also a lot of organizations out there that are doing superb work. Again, because of I tend to focus on problems and opportunities. So if you're doing a great job, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective. I have a very different perspective than a lot of people on the nonprofit sector. I particularly spend a lot of time with people who are starting nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
We do classes on starting nonprofits, which is anathema to a lot of people in the business community. Who needs another nonprofit?
Yeah.
There are people who say that the nonprofit sector ought to be, quote, regulated. And of course, they want to do the regulation, all kinds of association of business people. But I believe in the free market. If I have an idea and I have the energy, I have the right to start something. If you don't want to support it, then let the market forces prevail and let me fail.
Yeah.
If and it's up to me to help to make it work. As opposed to people who say, "Oh, we got 10 nonprofits doing that already." The term I think I made up, I'm not sure, but I think I made this up. Is the term nonprofit Darwinism, which is the survival of the fittest.
Yep. Survival.
And I don't believe in that. I believe everybody ought to be given that opportunity, and just because you're big doesn't mean you're better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess I'm a Democrat with a small d, and I really believe, as I said, it goes. Actually, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing the connection. It goes with my belief in the potential.
Yep. Yep.
you know,
Well, it goes back to the, sort of the free enterprise approach, right? If you've got the idea and you've got the gumption and the wherewithal to make it happen, by all means, go forward and do it. The reality is, though, you need to understand the basics. Because what I was thinking when you were talking about that is that, if you can't skip ahead and go, past go and collect your $200 until you've put in your dues and you've taken some of those lumps and you've gone through some of those challenges. But that's what creates good organizations, good leadership,
exactly.
good boards, et cetera. And I think, one of the things that I've heard that's kind of prevalent from, the Austin, I would say the Austin based nonprofits. And, you and I were at an event not too long ago. It seems like forever since COVID started, but we were at an event where there was kind of this coming together of different people from different, sort of organizations, and some were from out of state nonprofits coming here trying to make a name for themselves, and others that were here and have been established. And there's a competitive front just naturally happening because everybody's competing for those dollars, right? But the reality is, if your center does a phenomenally great job of equalizing the playing field. Like if you want to
That's
come
our
in,
goal.
yeah, I mean, you want to play by the rules. Everybody wants to commit to, maximizing their potential, but they actually want to contribute to the community of giving. The thing that I always admired about what your mission is that you're really trying to give people the ability to do that. And you do that not by looking at the other person as a competitor, but potentially an ally and a partner.
Yeah, yeah, for the most part,
Yeah.
you know, you know, and I don't want to paint us as a paragons of generosity because we're not, but that's not a royal we, but I mean organizational. Yeah, I think that what we're concerned about is fundamentals,
Yep.
and constantly. I'm working with an organization right now in Dallas that shall remain nameless, where they are creating a very worthwhile entity, but the head of it is a retired mucky muck from some big Dallas organization.
Mm-hmm.
And mucky muck start off with imaginary numbers in my accounting system. So rather than giving them credibility, they need to make up for it.
Yeah.
But and there's challenges because this individual has good intentions, but he knows what he knows, and he's become successful based on what he knows.
Yeah.
But the thing with, not in terms of service delivery, but in terms of the governance side of nonprofits or the strategy part of nonprofits, is the engagement of people is sometimes, more often in my experience, more important than the outcome.
Yeah.
That, it's a very, and so for-profits think in terms of efficiency. Um, and and when you look at the nonprofit sector, by design, almost, it's totally inefficient.
Yeah.
It is very inefficient to have 15, even three people, but some of the sizes of the boards, to come together and make a decision.
Yeah.
When they don't think about it day in and day out like the director or staff. It's very inefficient.
Yeah.
But it sometimes, not always, is very effective because they're engaged. And so this process of engagement, which I know is also important in terms of employee relationships. My wife is an HR person, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's our focus in the nonprofit sector, is to get people to see their personal responsibility, whether they see it as something because of their spiritual connection, their religious connection, their faith connection, or just because they realize but for the grace of God go I, whether they believe in God or not. Okay.
Yeah.
What you were saying before.
Yeah.
So there's a very strong underlying philosophy to what we're trying to accomplish here. And we're always looking at that. And again, I'm very, very fortunate that people like Lisa, and Kate Tolliver and Ann Pham, and people I work with, people like you who, give up your energies and so forth, are willing to be on the ride with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you make it easy. You give us all a hard time, of course, but at the end of the day, you are the mark of a good leader because you are passionate about what you do and why you do it and how you do it. and you're opinionated to the point where you will say exactly why we all need to get in line, lockstep. But you know about these things in a way that I think that a lot of people don't. And the thing that I've always admired about you is the fact that you create. I mean, you have so many fans in Austin and so many people that we know in common that when your name comes up, there's always that smile. Oh, Barry, right? Barry's gonna tell you how it is, and he's gonna give you the impassioned pitch, but it's always based in a way of making an organization like a nonprofit, or the leadership, or the board, or just that individual that's contributing their time and talent to that organization. You're always trying to get the best out of everybody, and you won't let anybody give up on themselves, which is why I think you've been so successful. I mean, it's a hell of a legacy, my friend. You have one hell of a legacy that you have created in Austin, and I mean, you're just an absolute gift.
Do you know something about my future longevity that we're talking about legacy?
Yeah, well, that's why we're doing this on video. They asked me to.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
You mean the Austin American? This is part of my obituary file for the Austin American Statesman.
Let's not go there. You got many, many years to worry, not have to worry about that. But I want to switch gears for one second because
absolutely.
I have to include one thing that
I didn't know we were in gears, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we vacillate between neutral and sixth gear all the time.
Oh,
So I mean,
okay.
that's pretty much how we are.
I
But
thought we were in reverse.
yeah. You did something for me a couple of months ago when you and I were supposed to have a Zoom call, and we were going to talk about some things that
You
were
didn't call the police, did you?
No. I admit nothing. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
Okay.
You actually, I had an injury, and I had to reschedule a call that we never did get rescheduled. So it's great to be on this call with you, but we'll have to do the other one that we were going to do before. But I had an injury, and a couple of days later, this book showed up at my house. I'm going to get out on the camera here. Stan Lee, A Life in Comics. And this came with one of your amazing cards. And I have to tell people, the funny thing about Barry is you will always, when you have a meeting with Barry or you see him for any length of time, he will end up taking out his pen, and he will write something down on a card and hand it to you. But you sent this to me a couple of days after my accident when I was recovering from what turned out to be a shattered clavicle. And this book just came at the right time. And I remember asking you, I'm like, I can't believe you took the time to do that. I can't believe that you remembered that I had at some point told you I liked comic books and that, Spider-Man was my guy. And you're like, Stan Lee, that's who I need to send the book to, this book to you, because you would appreciate it. And I read it. And the whole time I just had a smile on my face as I was reading it, because it was such an amazing gesture from a great friend. And I'm so appreciative. But that's the kind of person you are. You pick up on these things. You may not necessarily make note of it in the moment, or even, speak of it at that time, but your brain is constantly processing these things. And then who knows, down the road, you always seem to manufacture a way to get somebody to really smile and have a even bigger, truer appreciation of who you are. So I just had to thank you for that, because it really got me through, believe it or not.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah. I mean,
it's amazing what a simple book can do.
It is. And, it's funny because, it isn't even just books that, I went back and I've had a couple of these cards when we've had lunch or meetings in the past, and you give me some ideas and you put it on this card. How did that come about, where you just always carried this piece of paper and this pen, and you either jot it down for your own reference or you provide it to the person that's lucky enough to be in your environment?
Well, I always carry index cards.
Yeah.
And when I was young, when my kids were younger, I'm a fountain pen nut.
Yeah.
Okay? So I've always had fountain pens. I always carry it. And it's great for the cleaners. I mean, there's always leaks, and it's good. It's good for the economy. But my kids used to call these magic cards. And I'm always writing things down.
Yeah.
I think it's part of my my internal learning system
Yeah.
in terms of creativity, in terms of you never know when things will come together.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at synchronicity, and how that happens. Um, and so, so I'm always doing that. And I also love writing with my pen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when somebody gets their shoulder, broken apart or whatever part it was, I say to myself, I don't say, "Oh my God, it must hurt." I say, "Oh my God, here's an opportunity to use my pen."
I love it. I love it. And what's your favorite fountain pen?
It's right here.
What kind is it? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's Delta.
Delta.
Delta. This happens to be the caduceus. This happens to be like a position symbol. But
Ah.
yeah, I've got about 18 or 20 of them so far. I collect them.
They are your trademark. I will say I was at an event pre-COVID and somebody was saying, I met this guy and he was so passionate and had this, and I can't even remember the guy's name. I think it was Dave. And I don't remember what he was trying to do at the time, but he was trying to enter consulting into the nonprofit space. He's like, but I met this guy from the community college, and I'm just smiling as I let him talk. And he said, he had this motion and he pulled this pen out and he just started writing down with such conviction. And he gave me this message and he said, I just remember, I'm like, Barry Silverberg. And he's like, yes, that was it. I'm like, Barry is known for his pens and his ideas. So he's like, I don't see anybody write anything down anymore. I'm like, well, because of him, I carry a pen and a notepad around all the time. You inspired
That's right.
that ripple. Yeah. Because there's something that we lack as a society now when we just put it into our phone or we just type it in an email or whatever. But if you can make a difference in somebody's life, believe it or not, and I knew we were doing this interview, but I will share a very quick story. That guy he immediately was, he was totally drawn to the fact that you did that and he liked it. So it makes an impression. You probably never know that unless I told you. But I was in Albuquerque about a week and a half ago, and I've been thinking about typewriters because as a writer, I kind of just feel like I need a typewriter, right?
Oh,
Not that
yeah.
I'm going to type my next great American novel on
Yeah.
it, but it's this symbol. And so I've been looking at vintage typewriters, and I found this vintage typewriter store on the internet, and it happened to be in Albuquerque. So I went by, visited with this guy, 55 years old. He's been in the business, 55 years fixing typewriters, and he's got all these old.
I think they did a documentary on the guy.
Well, there is one called California Typewriter, and it's a different guy. He's out in California. This guy's in Albuquerque.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get his movie made next. But I ended up talking to him and getting sort of the history of some of the typewriters he had. And I happened to mention to him, I said, the two things that are very, tactical, you can put in your hands is that typewritten note and, this note card that you've come up with. And so, I just happened to share, I was going to be interviewing you and gave him a little bit of a background about how that had made an impression. And I sort of want to do more of that myself, but I also want to use the typewriter as a way to communicate ripples in very unexpected ways. So you will be getting a typewritten. Now I know where you live. I could just drop it off, but you'll be getting something typewritten from me. But it's the experience. It's that thing that just stands out as so different from what we see day to day in our lives, right?
It's personal.
It is
You know.
very personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, and you've made a legacy for yourself. Well, as we wrap this up, I got to ask you one question. What does the ripple effect mean to you?
I think it's about connection. And I think it's about giving people an opportunity to unleash that potential. I think the kinds of questions and the kind of interaction that takes place, particularly with the rapidity of it, kind of breaks down the defense of really thinking in advance. I think that and allows people to be more genuine.
Yeah.
The word authentic is overused so many times.
Yeah.
It's kind of like integrity. Once you fake it, everything's okay. But I think a lot of people fake authenticity too.
Yeah, I do too.
In the moment, as I've experienced, I think about twice actually. In the moment, it just allows you just to be.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's, you know, that's great. You know,
That's a great definition. I appreciate that. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think the value of this, and you create ripples every single day with every conversation you have, with every note card you give away, or with every idea that you generate based on a conversation that you write down to take action on down the road, whenever that might be. You're creating that ripple, and you know, like I said, you've built a legacy here in Austin that will probably never be equaled. And, I'm so grateful for your friendship and for your support over these years. And, we finally reached that stage where you don't call me Bill at every event that you see me just to
Bill,
jack with me.
I thought that was your name. No, the conversation at the restaurant is take that bill, and you're always pushing it over to me. That's the problem.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, it was just a completely misunderstood approach there, I guess. Yeah. Well, speaking of which, we definitely have to get together and have lunch and
George,
and connect. What's that?
Thanks, George.
Yeah. Thanks, George. Yeah, you guys can't see it. I'm actually going to for those of you that see this on the or actually hearing this on the podcast, you'll have to go to my YouTube channel where we actually will show this. I'm going to see if I can take this off because I'm going to show it so you can. Oh, we don't have your title up there, but he put for his own name, George the Stud.
We all live a fantasy life.
We all do. Absolutely. But
it's thankfully, much better than the real one.
Yeah, sometimes that's absolutely true. I truly, truly appreciate you being a part of this conversation. You are an amazing individual. Just real briefly, how can people get in touch with you? We're going to put this up on the YouTube channel. We'll put some links up, but for those that hear it on the podcast, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, there's two ways. One is at ACC, Silverberg at austincc.edu, or the simpler way is my personal email, which is my name reversed, silverberg.barry@gmail.
Okay.
And if you go to our website, nonprofitaustin.org, my name, I think, is still up there. The college hasn't given me any notices. We're here to help.
Yeah.
And I say we because it's me and my colleagues. And what's made us successful is a team. So, and people like you, Steve, who given, is that your name, Steve? Who've given us your time and your energy and shared your blessings. So I thank you for this opportunity. Now I'm going to have to retire all these jokes because now it's been recorded. But thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for participating today. And thanks everybody for listening, or, if you happen to be catching this on the podcast, wherever your ears might lead you to listen to this, I encourage you to, look for Barry and look at the work that they're doing, because it's amazing. It can be very inspirational, even if you're not in Austin. Just to understand what they're creating here can be a model for your community and what is possible in your neck of the woods. I also want to say, if you're on the YouTube channel and you're seeing Barry, he is this energetic, and if you get the opportunity to share a drink with him or go have lunch, you're in for a treat. I promise you. Such a good guy and a true Rippler. But until next time, my friends, thanks for joining the Ripple Effect podcast. I appreciate you participating, listening. Let us know what you thought, and we will be back very soon with a new episode with another interesting guest or another concept of the process of rippling. So until then, take care, and as always, Barry, ripple on.
I'll try.